Welcome everyone to this tech talk with inSided about user communities. All attendees will be on mute. You can ask questions in the questions box of GoTo, and we will answer them in the end in the Q&A. Today our guest is Kenneth Refskaert. He's Enterprise Customer Success Manager at inSided. Welcome, Kenneth.
Thank you, Jolene. Nice to be here.
Good. Before joining inSided, Kenneth spent 15 years in building and leading digital service and community teams at TomTom, KPN, Sonos, and Wacom. So great to have you here. We will start out with a question to our audience, just to know, get a feel about what they think about the topic. So for the audience, you can go to menti.com, use the code 87072991. And answer our question. It's a multiple choice. What's the first thing that you would do as a user, of course, when you have a question or a problem with a product or service? Do you call their support desk? Do you search with Google for the answer? Do you read FAQs? Read the manual maybe? Or buy a new one? We already have some searches with Google. And it takes a while usually for the results to come through.
Yeah, so far 100% of users are selecting search with Google. That's interesting. Curious if anyone's going to select anything else.
I think reading manuals is outdated anyways.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies don't even publish manuals anymore, right?
Well, I guess not. I'll read FAQs.
Somebody would go to the FAQs, yeah.
I'll give it a bit more time to see if we have any additional answers. FAQs is becoming more popular.
Yeah, it's interesting. So far, nobody wants to call support. That's interesting.
Nope. Wonder if that's based on experience. Probably it is. A search with Google is by far the most. Going up a bit.
We have somebody. There's always somebody that wants to call support as a first option.
Yeah, talk to a human.
Absolutely.
But still, search.
Depends on the question as well, of course, right? This is a very generically phrased question, but I think it depends also the kind of issue you're having to some extent. But a very interesting result, seeing huge majority of people wanting to search with Google, at least to start with.
Yeah, and I think without knowing it, we've probably all used user communities before, is what you told me, Kenneth. Could you show us how this works? Because I think this is also aligned with this result that we see.
Yeah, it's a very interesting result indeed. So I thought I'd kick off just by illustrating probably one of the most recognizable experiences that we all have when it comes to user communities. So let me share my screen and just walk you through a little story, a little example use case that we can probably all relate to. So let me go into my screen, share. Hoping everybody can see this. So imagine I'm a customer. I am looking to buy a Sonos speaker. I will use Sonos as an example again a little bit later. I used to work at Sonos as one of my favorite examples. But let's say I'm a customer and I have a speaker in mind, the Sonos One. It's a really cute, wonderful little speaker. And I have a question. I want to know, can I use this speaker as a Bluetooth speaker as well, or is it only Wi-Fi? It's a pretty specific question. I could do a few things. I could go to the Sonos homepage. I could look through product pages. I could maybe go through FAQs or find the chatbot. There's a lot of things I could do. But looking at the results from the question we just asked, probably a lot of us would do what I would do is initially I would just start by asking in Google. So I'm just going to ask my question. Can I use the Sonos One as a Bluetooth speaker in Google? And first of all, this is really interesting. We see a result here coming from the Sonos user community, and Google has already grabbed the answer and displayed it directly in the results here. You can see this is in fact the definitive answer. The answer is no, you cannot use the Sonos One as a Bluetooth speaker. So with the lowest amount of effort you can possibly imagine, I've already gotten the answer to my question. As a user, I may choose, of course, to continue on and click to the community. You can see that all the other results, no other result really answers this specific question. I would have to probably go through a lot of effort to find this answer on another site. But here, the top answer looks great. So I'm going to click through. And I've, of course, landed here deep in the Sonos community where a user has asked this question in the past. And the answer has been posted within the topic. And you can even see that the community team from Sonos has been very smart. They noticed that this topic was getting a lot of traffic, so they've even updated it with some additional information to say, hey, you cannot use the Sonos One with Bluetooth, but there are in fact other products like the Sonos Move where you can. So this is probably one of the most recognizable experiences of a user community that we all have. We search on Google, and very often we find the answer on a community just like this, like with Sonos.
Yeah, it's what I would do. We do have a comment from Antoine. He says he would search on YouTube.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it depends maybe a little bit on the type of learner, type of user that we are. I also will search some things on YouTube, especially if it's something about how to do something and I'm looking for detailed steps. So that's a great case. And of course, Google will also display results from YouTube when you search.
Yeah, so you would get to the same type of content. And then this is your core business, right? inSided's core business. And could you tell us a bit more about your company and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So inSided was founded in 2010. So we're an Amsterdam-based company. Our two co-founders were in fact already building user communities before they founded inSided. They both have a background of working with communities. In 2010, decided to set up a company focused on this, and initially working with T-Mobile in the Netherlands. And in the years since then, the community space has evolved, and inSided has been growing and growing. We are now 11 years later at a place where we have 147 customers, and not just in the Netherlands, but we actually have customers all over the world now, a lot in Europe, also in North America. While I think we have quite a lot of different types of customers, of course, we started with telecom, and we still have a lot of telecom customers. T-Mobile is an example, but also KPN and many other telecom customers. We're also increasingly serving other types of verticals like B2B software is growing a lot. So we've got great customers like Gainsight and Looker and Typeform. And we also have consumer electronics, of course, like Sonos and among our customers. So yeah, we're really focused on this niche of building great customer engagement communities. We're not trying to be a CRM system. We're not trying to be a social media monitoring platform. We really want to be the best at building customer engagement communities.
Sounds very interesting, and we have some overlap in the clients I see here as well. And I think a lot of the audience that we have today work with Society for clients as well. So it would be interesting to know what trends they see in digital service and customer experience at the moment. We have another Menti for that with the same code, and this will be a word cloud. So I'm curious to know what will pop up. Usually takes a while for the first answers to come in.
While we're waiting for these to come in, quick question to Thijs, our tech guy. I have lost the ability to share my screen in GoTo, so you did something magical before to enable that. If you could do that again, would be great. I want to share my screen again in a second.
Okay, yeah, I took it because I wanted to show the slide. I will give it back.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Thanks, Thijs. We see bot and key, digital manuals, chatbots.
Yeah, not surprising to see chatbot here. It's a big trend, of course. AI is interesting.
And chatbot is like a neighbor to you, right?
Yeah, it's definitely an emerging technology, which we're also really interested in, also in terms of like how it relates to what we do. It's really kind of next level of FAQs, I think.
Improvements. Well, that's always good. Another more bots.
Lots of bots.
Yeah, digital humans. We've had Daisy last week. Our virtual human to be, I would say, it's still under construction. It's quite interesting.
I think it's fair to say most chatbots that are available today are still under construction. I think it's
well,
an emerging technology.
Yeah, digital human isn't quite a chatbot, but also in the same space, I would say. Okay. Interesting results. And then what do you see happening that relates to user communities?
Yeah, so from our perspective, as we look into the service, the customer experience industries, and some of us have been working in these industries for many years. So myself, I've been working with service teams for over 15 years. And there's a number of things that we observe. So things that are shifting. It feels like there's a mindset shift in terms of like an old paradigm transitioning into a new one. So some of the things we observe changing is if we look at how service organizations have, I don't know, Thijs, if you can show the slide. There we go. Those of us who've worked with service organizations for a while would probably recognize some of the themes we're mentioning here on the left-hand side. So I think traditionally there has been this focus on the contact center. So really prioritizing the one-to-one channels. And a lot of engagement and service was around scaling the operations of those channels. We saw over last years, there was more and more channels became available. Companies adopted social in a big way, webcare, Facebook, Twitter, lots of channels which are really kind of given to the customer to choose from. So the customer was able to select from a menu of one-to-one channels. And in this kind of more traditional reactive way, we tended to look at solving problems in a very reactive way. So it tended to be about the customer needing to reach out, we would solve the problem. We would be trying to do it as cheaply as possible, trying to reduce costs. And this is where the early user communities came in. Already over 10 years ago, companies were building communities, but they were really focused on cost reduction. It was the support forum use case, trying to just deflect contacts. And in that area of like reactive, old way of thinking about service, the customer often had to make quite a lot of effort. They needed to navigate multiple platforms, multiple channels, and it was quite a lot of effort. So probably very recognizable for everybody, and but also recognizable, I think, also looking at some of the things we saw from the word cloud just now is some of the emerging trends that we see right now. So what we believe is going to really be like a big trend over the coming years is going to be this digital first mindset, where the primary priority within strategy of service organizations is going to be more about getting digital first, right? Getting digital right first. So the contact center is going to stay important, but getting digital right in terms of self-service and automation is going to be probably the most important orienting pillar. I think we're going to be seeing more and more organizations streamlining the number of channels they have, especially their one-to-one channels. We see probably a lot of companies starting to let go of especially email, but potentially also some of the webcare channels, and focusing one-to-one channels on a small set of channels that are really effective, that really work well for their customers and for them as an organization. Part of this transition is about shifting mindset from just reactively solving problems to really serving customer needs in a way that isn't just about cost reduction, but is about actually building loyalty, having ongoing engagement with customers. And yeah, final point on here is it's really about taking the effort away from the customer and offering an experience which is much more personalized, much more relevant, and much less effort, really. think the example I showed initially, where I was a customer with a question about a Sonos speaker, and I was very, very, very quickly, literally with one click, able to find this very specific answer through a user community. And that's just one example of how all these things can come together to deliver a really, amazing customer experience, a really low effort customer experience. So this is where, we see our user communities playing an important role as we look at these evolving trends on the right-hand side.
Yeah, and of course, in this light, it makes perfect sense for a company to have a user community, right? So what would be the main drivers for companies?
Yeah, so the way we look at our communities is that we serve three main use cases. So these are the things that most of our customers are would say that they are focusing their communities on. So these use cases or functions of the community are probably very recognizable to everybody. I think especially the first one, driving successful self-service and peer-to-peer support is really the traditional use case of these types of communities. This is where it started. You can ask questions and you can find answers, and you have peers, other customers helping each other, driving a ton of value. So this is a big part of these kind of communities. But we also see more and more attention being paid to these platforms in delivering value in a broader way than just that. So we see engagement with customers becoming more and more important. So having an ongoing relationship with customers by providing them with content which is interesting, educational, maybe not things that they would have called support about, but things that they are nevertheless interested in and they do have questions about and they would like to engage with. And by having this platform where you can engage, actually building deeper relationships and building advocacy. Another part that we see in our communities more and more is the structuring of product feedback. So when you open up a community to your customers, typically those customers will have feedback and ideas, and they will share those ideas, and you can actually choose to organize the way you handle that feedback in a very structured feedback loop together with your product team. And these are like the main use cases, and some of our best customers really have a combination of these operating within their communities. All of this really, leads up to the goal of having happy customers and having more retention, of course. Maybe to make this a little bit more visual, I think I want to show just a couple of examples of our communities. So let me share my screen again and just show you a couple of our customers, some brands, I think. Great. Yeah, so a couple of brands here that I think you guys will recognize. So I'm just going to show you some things which some of the dynamics that make communities function the way they do and make them drive so much value. So KPN is one of our customers, a great customer of ours. They have a very, very mature community. They actually started with their user communities over 10 years ago, recently celebrated their 10-year anniversary. They originally were on a different platform, and some years ago transitioned over to inSided. And yeah, this is a great example of a very mature community that has just a extraordinary amount of useful user-generated content on the platform. You can see that they have coming up to 1 million posts on the platform. So tons and tons of content that is helpful and valuable to other users. One thing I wanted to highlight on this community is I'm just going to look at this little gamification element here, where you can see some of the most active community users, and just have a look at what one of these users looks like. So this is the profile of a user called Peter G. And you can see here that he has been a member of the community since 2014. Actually been a happy customer since 1988. And well, you can see that he has been, since he joined the community, has posted 35,000 times and has answered 4,500 questions correctly with a marked best answer. It's a little piece of our platform. It's a really extraordinary amount of engagement, right? And if you think about this type of user who is really a brand advocate, really an expert, communities are unique in giving you an ability to build relationships with customers who are like this. If it wasn't for the community, KPN probably wouldn't have a relationship with somebody like this in the same way. Here they're able to build a deep level of engagement with him. You can see how active he's been just in the last hour. And the cool thing is they have a number of users just like this. And this is what's part of what's really powering this community and making it such a fantastic place to get answers and find information.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of content that he creates as a user for KPN.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary. But it is something we see quite regularly. It's not that KPN is unique in this. This is when you have a community and you grow it to a mature place, it becomes very self-sustaining thanks to this kind of dynamic that we have with users like this. Another example I can quickly show, I mentioned Sonos before in my original example. Sonos is, of course, a big global brand. So this is their English community. They have a couple of other language communities for their global audience. And Sonos speakers are products that people are passionate about. So they have a community where there's also a lot of great peer-to-peer engagement, a lot of super users. And one thing I wanted to quickly highlight on the Sonos community is that while it's a place where you can go and you can ask questions, maybe you have a technical problem or some kind of product, some kind of issue with the product, you can ask those questions here. But what Sonos decided to do was also to create this what to get part of the community. And this is not a place to solve technical problems. This is a place to go if you have a question about what to buy. Like, hey, should I get this speaker? Should I buy that speaker? I want advice. And the amazing thing about this type of content on the community is that, here you are getting advice and feedback from other customers, from other users, which is going to be much more trustworthy than if you went to the company itself. So here's just an example of somebody who has asked a very detailed question about what kind of home theater setup. This is extraordinarily detailed. And you can see straight away one of the super users has jumped in and has been providing, again, very, very detailed, very trustworthy recommendations. You can imagine that with a question like this, you can't go to an FAQ. The chatbot's not going to help you. You could call the contact center, but you probably wouldn't get this kind of trustworthy advice from contacting the company itself. This is really unique to what a community can do.
And then we have a question along the way that I don't want to keep till the end. It's from Michiel, and it was about the KPN user you just showed, but same goes, of course, for this super user. Why is Peter G doing this and what motivates him?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. That's often the question that gets asked when we talk about these kind of dynamics. I think it starts with a level of interest. So a shared interest between a company and their customers. And when you have that level of shared interest, certain users will gravitate to the community and they will be intrinsically motivated to just to connect with the brand and be part of the community. And as they then start engaging, the best practices that we typically talk about, along with the design of our platform, are all sort of built around making the community an engaging place to be and incentivizing participation through, for example, gamification. So there are things like ranks, badges, point systems, things that you can earn as you kind of participate more and help people in the community. But beyond the gamification systems, what's really important is like a great community team like KPN will recognize somebody like Peter and build a relationship and actually build a program around their super users. So these are people who will also get recognition and will actually build a relationship with the team from KPN. And that's probably one of the most exciting and rewarding elements of being a super user in the community. Because you love a brand, you love the products, you're interested, you like to help people, and you're also gaining some recognition and direct relationship with the brand and the people behind it. So you see this across communities like KPN and Sonos, users who just really like coming back and engaging on the community because they can help people and they get recognized for it.
Okay.
One more example quickly to show maybe before I stop sharing my screen is T-Mobile in the US is a great community that migrated over to us just a few months ago, almost exactly 10 years after we had started with T-Mobile in the Netherlands. And this is a really big community in the US. It's really beautiful. And maybe one example I can show you here is that while, of course, we also have community structure where you can ask questions, you can get answers to whatever kind of question you have in mind. But the T-Mobile team do something which a lot of our customers do, and they actually also use the community as a place to share news, updates, content. So for example, here's an article they had posted a couple of months ago about a new device coming out. So they use the community as this one-to-many communication platform where they could post this announcement, which is super relevant to a lot of their customers. It's gotten a lot of views, a lot of replies. And it's in a platform where there's engagement, where people can respond, they can ask follow-up questions. And this is another aspect of engagement with your customers. It goes far beyond just solving problems or answering questions. This is really about finding a shared interest with customers. You can see initial reaction here. It looks amazing. Wow. Just another example of how communities function.
Cool. So we already talked a bit about the neighbors of user communities, or I call them neighbors, but how do they fit in this landscape? Because we already have call centers, chatbots, virtual humans are coming up, and then how do user communities fit in?
Yeah, so it's a question, of course, we get sometimes. It's for example, we're building a chatbot. Do we still need a community? We have all these channels. What do we do? So one of the things we observe is if you look at the ecosystem of channels, we already mentioned that we see organizations increasingly bringing more focus to their channel strategy. So especially with the one-to-one channels. So we see companies adopting less one-to-one channels and really focusing on the ones that are truly effective. That might be phone and chat. But then next to that, you have the one-to-many channels, where most companies will choose to still have their official FAQs. A lot of organizations are adopting a chatbot now, which of course is a super exciting technology. I kind of see the chatbot as a next generation of the FAQ, right? It's offering up that content, but in a much more engaging, dynamic way. It can offer automation and can offers up a lot of possibilities. But what we see is that the community and what we're calling here an engagement center, community engagement center, has a unique place within this ecosystem. It's doing something which the other channels cannot do in a number of ways. So, for example, it's answering questions which are a lot of the time very specific and very personal. So, if you look at the example I showed just a second ago of asking for feedback on what to buy, and you can see this amazing interaction with another user when you're asking for advice on the community. That's something really unique that you can't replicate on other channels. And there's a lot of other questions which are just uniquely well served on the community, where you can ask a specific question, you can get a specific answer from somebody, and that answer will be valuable for thousands of other users because it'll be easily available through Google. Maybe another way of illustrating this is if you can go to the next slide, Thijs. When we're really looking at the two one-to-many platforms, and Jolene, you had mentioned the chatbot specifically. We're very excited about chatbots as well, and we also think FAQs are very important. But the way we look at these two coexisting is that chatbots and official FAQs are typically designed to answer the most core fundamental questions, commonly recurring questions, right? So you could call that kind of like the short tail of content, and they can do that really, really well. So for example, you could go to a chatbot and ask, how I want a refund. How does that work? It's probably a very common question for a lot of organizations. The chatbot is probably well suited to answer that. However, customers throughout their journey have all kinds of questions, and there is this long tail of questions which a official FAQ in a chatbot will never really be able to answer. So when you get into the area of asking very personalized questions, by that I mean personal to your situation, something very specific, right? So like that question of, hey, I want to get advice on this specific home theater setup, or I want to know about this very specific feature like the Sonos Bluetooth feature. These are such specific detailed questions that the community will offer up as part of this long tail content. This user generated content making machine will produce this extraordinary knowledge base with thousands and thousands of answers, and they will all become searchable through Google and will serve as this additional knowledge base that will answer a ton of questions that your chatbot and your FAQs want, because it will be too specific and too edge case for them to be answered.
Interesting, and I think the benefits for users are quite clear, because they have access to much more information and much more specific information. But then, what would businesses usually identify as the business benefits for user communities?
Yeah, so we mentioned already that when it comes to building communities, the traditional use case has been around service, and that is still a core part of a lot of the communities that we run with our customers. Yeah, Thijs, I think you can go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. So, and when you look at from the service perspective, what we're really doing with the community is we are answering as many questions as possible that can be answered on the community there, because there's a lot of questions that your one-to-one channels are actually not the best place for. So if you think about that question I asked about the Bluetooth speaker, that I could have asked that question to an agent, but it wouldn't have been a great use of the agent's time, right? So what we basically see the community doing is picking up a lot of those types of questions and freeing up the time of agents to become more productive and to really become experts in doing what they do best. So one of the ways you would see that value is by looking at something like a ratio of visitors who are being served on the community versus tickets in your one-to-one channels. So we call that a self-service ratio, and that's a great thing to observe. And typically what you see over time is that you start serving more and more and more visitors on the community in relation to your traditional channels, and certain channels will even start noticeably going down. So that's a very well-known use case, like really how many people you're directly helping with the community. But we also see a lot of our customers thinking more broadly than that today. So one of the more broad ways to think about what a community does is around engagement. So this comes back to that having a relationship with your customers over time, not trying to reduce the amount of contacts you have with your customers, but recognizing that having positive interactions with your customers is actually good, and that's actually going to drive retention, loyalty. So one of the ways you would look at that is by thinking about how many people are you reaching. So that would be, for example, your monthly active users metric, which is how companies like Facebook and Twitter think about usage, which you can translate to monthly active customers. So you could actually look at what percentage of our customers are we actually interacting with through our community on a monthly basis. So that's a really, really interesting metric we see our customers adopting. Finally, we're looking at product feedback, which is also a big trend that we see. A lot of companies more and more deciding to be customer-centric with their product roadmap as well, not just with their support organization. And so when you start bringing your customers into your product ideation process, you can start to see that value by looking directly at what percentage of ideas from our customers have we actually implemented? To what extent have we actually been listening to our customers' needs? So this is something we do ourselves at inSided as well. So a large part of what's on our roadmap gets actually driven by the requests of our customers. We actually have delivered around 40% of all the votes our customers have ever placed on our community. And this says a lot about how customer-centric you are with your roadmap. So these are examples. This is typically how the customers that we work with look at the value and the impact that the community is delivering.
Yeah, and that's for this moment, I think. I think, by the way, it's great that you drink your own champagne, and also makes very much it makes a lot of sense. And so these are the three main use cases at the moment. And before I ask you, Kenneth, I would like to ask the audience what they think could be possible trends or use cases for the coming 5 years for user communities. So you can go back to menti.com, use the same code, and we have another word cloud here. And please let us know what you think could be other possibilities for user communities in future.
I'm very curious about what the audience is going to say to this one.
Yeah,
it's a very open-ended question. Very curious where people will what people will think of. Innovation, it's a good one.
So at least they believe that there will be developments.
It's definitely good. I'm imagining some of the audience is also thinking a little bit about this one. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to predict, of course. Gamification video. Maybe that one is from Antoine, who likes to search on YouTube, which I think is quite a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do see video coming together with communities, right? So a lot of our customers also embed video within the community. So those can definitely come together in a smart way.
Okay, so you're already working on that then?
Yeah, it's core part of our platform. It's definitely possible. So something our customers do.
Great.
Combined with bots, increasing sales. Very interesting.
LinkedIn benchmarking.
Yeah, benchmarking is an interesting one.
Does it ring a bell to you, or?
Well, it's something that comes up in conversations with our customers a lot, which is, how are we doing in relationship to other communities? And I think because the enterprise community industry is not that old, right? It's last 10, 15 years. It's still a place where there are emerging insights when it comes to data points, proof points for when you're successful, and that's where benchmarking becomes such a big theme. Say like, hey, how are communities overall around the world performing in different areas, and what would success really look like for me?
Good. Something
that we talk a lot with our customer base, of course, because we have 140 plus customers, so we're able to we have a lot of comparisons within our data sets.
And then it's about the actual how the communities are performing, right? Not the products or services that the communities relate to.
Yeah, really specifically about the value that the community is delivering. Exactly. Yeah.
Good. And AR, I think, is an interesting one. For me, it's difficult to imagine, but you have ideas about that?
Augmented reality with I don't know. I think I like the idea, but it's a little bit like AI. It's one of those things we've been talking about AI for how many years, and what we see is these days is typically not really AI yet, right? I think it's usually something we wouldn't yet call true intelligence. So AR, I'm not sure yet. I need to wait and see how things go the next few years. I'm not sure if AR is how AR will look 10 years from now.
Okay.
Like, remember when we thought 3D TV was going to be the next big thing, right?
Yeah, and I haven't heard about that for a while.
Nope, it wasn't very useful.
We have events. I think you have events in the platform as well, right?
Yeah, we do. That's really interesting that somebody's mentioned that. That's great. Physical meetings. Yeah.
Cool. And specific rewards. That kind of relates to a question we still had in the questions box by Fergal. He asks about manipulation. So that well, I'll just read the question. Is Peter G Again, back to the KPN guy, I think he made an impression. Is he being manipulated by the gamification built into the system, or is there something tangible on offer?
It's a really interesting question, and I think it's something that I think comes up when you talk about things like gamification, also outside of the community space, right? There's a lot of buzz right now about social media and how social media platforms are being used to kind of hook our attention and manipulate us in a way. So I think there's an interesting ethical question whenever you do something like this. But I think the way I would look at this is I've also been managing communities for many years at companies like TomTom and Sonos and KPN. And I have found when I build relationships with users like Peter G, it's really a mutually beneficial relationship. It's not just about manipulating their attention with gamification systems. It's about building a true relationship with some of the most engaged customers you have within your customer base. And this is a level of communication and engagement and relationship that they also are looking for and really enjoy and appreciate. So I don't think there's anything sinister going on here in terms of kind of psychological manipulation. There is maybe a question around gamification. I would accept that. I won't speak to the philosophical ethics of that necessarily, but I think what we're doing with communities goes much deeper than that. It is really about engaging with people. And it's really ultimately you build human relationships with your super users. When you're a company and you get your super users as a group together, you bring them to your office. You connect them, you get sometimes the CEO will come and speak to them, and you get product teams together with them. Those are the types of things you typically do with these groups, and that's really, really interesting and exciting for these users. So I think the best practice would be definitely to take good care of these advocates and build a relationship that also is really rewarding and meaningful for them.
Yeah, and I think this is an entire new conversation on its own, or it could be, whether gamification is manipulation or not, but also does it exclude something tangible? So isn't this something tangible in itself? On the other hand, you don't just use your gamification usually, because you also relate to them in other ways.
Yeah. It is a big topic. I think one last thing I'll say, like the traditional best practice is to not reward users like this with money or very valuable things. The idea being that there's an intrinsic motivation here, and that actually it's more positive for the community to focus on the intrinsic motivation and just have a positive relationship and reward through the sense of recognition and connection you have as a brand. Some community managers do choose to incentivize with stuff, and that can also work, but giving away discounts or prizes and things. But yeah, for me, much more important is the actual relationship that you're building.
Okay, good. I hope, Fergal, this answers your question. Then I would be curious to know, Kenneth, what you think is in store for the future of user communities.
Yeah, so really interesting to see what the audience just posted in the word cloud. So I think I have a couple of examples I'd like to show in a second, which illustrate some of the themes that we see in communities today among some of our best customers. And oh yeah, I'm allowed to share again. That's great. And I think a lot of it really boils down to what I've been mentioning, I think, already in this webinar, which is if we look to the early years of enterprise communities, there was this very often a focus on the support forum. The community was kind of often in a little bit of a silo somewhere in the digital ecosystem, and it was a place you went, you could ask support questions, and it was a way of reducing costs. And what we really see over the coming years is the community becoming something broader than that, and being a place where you can engage with your customers in a broader way, not just to reduce costs, but to really meet those needs of your customers in more interesting, engaging ways, where it becomes actually about true engagement and loyalty and retention over time. So let me share my screen and just give you a couple of examples. So yeah, here Thijs has shown the slide. These are 3 examples I'll show. I can just share my screen and show you the real version. You don't have to look at the tiny slide version. So I'm going to start with our one of our customers, which is TMobile. They are a great customer. They have implemented the community and really done a great job of integrating it across the journey. So you'll see that the community is available over here in the top bar. Here I'm just on their support site. It's also available here. And if you look at the community, it is a service-focused community. So you could say, yeah, this is like the traditional use case, mostly focused on getting questions and answers. But what I want to highlight here is that they have they don't just have the user-generated content here. They also have a community knowledge base where they provide some really great questions and answers from their side to questions which are probably a little bit more detailed than you would expect to see on their main site. And what they have done a great job of is making the journey really coherent across the site. So I'm going to show you something. I've gone back to their main homepage, and I'm going to go into their support section. I'm just going to show you this page here. I'm going to go down to the delivery section. And this is one of their official FAQ pages, which answers some of the most common, most critical questions around deliveries. So really the core things. So you could say this is that short tail of content. And what they've done here is they've not just included a link to the community, but they've actually incorporated the community as part of this additional widget on the bottom left, which is one of the things our platform can do. So if I click on help, you'll see that they are actually surfacing additional content from the community within this page. So that long tail of more specific content is also available here. So if the official FAQ doesn't have the specific answer, it may be in the community. And if I click on this widget, I'm going to be able to actually directly on this page read the content from the community. I could even search the community from here, and and so on. So short tail content, long tail content coming together and building a more holistic journey for the user that makes it even easier to find the content that the users are looking for. So this is, again, a little bit of an expansion from the traditional way of thinking of a community. Another example, as we look at companies that are looking to really engage with their users, looking at ways of engaging with their customers beyond support forums, is I wanted to show Join. Join is a streaming company in Germany. They're growing a lot, really cool brand, cool company. And they went live with us not super long ago, so this is quite a new community, new and shiny. And one of the things they do here, while the community is also a place you can ask questions and you can do all your typical things in the community, but they also use it as this one-to-many platform to highlight content which is going to be relevant to their audience. So they had, for example, here a great article which is about all the highlights during the Easter weekend that was on television. I particularly like the Bud Spencer marathon here. If you don't know what that is, it means you're definitely under 40. But this is a great example of highlighting content that's relevant and interesting for their users. They also do that through events. So one of the things in the word cloud we just saw was events, which is something that we also do on our platform. So you can highlight events, have an events calendar on our platform, and Join use that to highlight, oops, sorry, click the wrong one, to actually highlight stuff which is coming on their streaming platform. So here you have Rocket Man as an event, and users can basically sign up here and also engage around it. So this is more than a support forum. This is really about engagement and offering content which is relevant and interesting to their users. I have one more example, which is a great example of something we're going to see more and more in the next few years. I saw in the word cloud as well, I think somebody had posted innovation, which I think is really interesting. We mentioned the product feedback loop, which is all about innovation and bringing customers into the product feedback roadmap creation process. We work with Deezer, who have multiple language communities, also very a global brand, very, very active community, lots of peer-to-peer engagement. This is really about music as well, and lots of interesting things happening on their community. And they started out with a service use case in mind as a primary driver, like a lot of our customers. But they have started to really, really embrace the product feedback loop on their community. So when you go to their community, they have a section over here as part of our platform where you can have a section for capturing ideas from customers. So here, their customers are able to, in this dedicated space, post ideas, things that they would like to see happen with the platform. They could vote on other ideas. Here we have this, even have this pipeline widget where you can see the status of ideas that are, currently in discussion, that have feedback from the Deezer team, and also lots of ideas that have actually been delivered already. And this has become really one of the biggest reasons that Deezer have the community at this point, because they get so much value from the feedback they get from customers. And this just allows them to capture that feedback in a really organized way, get it back to their product team, and have a transparent feedback loop that goes back to their customers. So this is another example. And all of these examples I've mentioned, again, really come back to this idea of community is something bigger than just a forum, like we used to think about it. We see that in the coming years as being an engagement center, really a center of engagement where you have multiple ways of engaging with customers. You can have events, groups, you may have knowledge articles, you may publish your product updates and release notes, things like that. It really becomes the one-to-many platform to engage with your customers.
I have a question specific about these product feedback loops and building the roadmap, because I think that's really interesting also from a design perspective. What do companies usually do? Because designers often, they do user groups, for example, and interviews and workshops to get user feedback, and they base the people they invite on the personas that they have made who will use their products and services. What does a user community add to that process?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think if I'm not a product person by heart. Ooh, saw the feed glitch there a little bit, but I've been working with product teams for many years, and I think doing user research is still incredibly important when you're validating your product and testing with customers. So I think those processes are super, super important, and they serve a great purpose in terms of testing your ideas and getting very, very specific feedback. I think the community really works alongside all of those existing product creation processes. It's really the place where you can listen to the ideas and the thoughts and the feedback that your customers have in an organized, structured, transparent way. If you have a product, if you have customers, your customers they're gonna have ideas and they're gonna have feedback, and they will be giving you that feedback in some way. So they may be telling contact center agents, they may be emailing you about it, they may be talking about it on a third-party platform or whatever. So they will be trying to let you know about this feedback, but often it's incredibly difficult to organize all of that feedback in a clean way. And especially to close the feedback loop with customers. So the community ideation use case is really unique in giving you a central place where your customers can come together and post their ideas and feedback. And by this activity of voting, you actually have this very, very clear view of what the wishes of your customers are. So it's a great way of getting a prioritized view of what your customers would like to see from you. And that is then one really important input into your roadmap. And then as you start building the product.
Yeah,
because absolutely.
To me, it seems really cool if I brought this ID and it got through the funnel until it was live in the product.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a user,
Absolutely. You think about retention, which is, growth and retention is what everything we do is about, really. We want to get new customers and keep our existing customers happy. And yeah, if you have that experience, you ask for something and you see that this is a company that listens, actually has done something with it and delivered it, that is an extraordinary experience, extraordinarily positive experience. And that's what we see more and more customers, of our customers, trying to do with their customer base.
Okay. We have a question from Frederick, and he asks, is the community support a silo or integrated with ordinary support? So I think this is more about who manages the community from the back end, or how you want to call it.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. We see our customers adopt community in a variety of ways. So sometimes the community is managed by a standalone team. So I think especially when you're initially starting a community, it can make the most sense to just have a standalone team of 1 or 2 people who are focused on the community and do that as their day job, so they really have focus. But what we also see is that as communities grow over time, and a lot of our customers' communities are very, very big, very, very mature, and some of our customers have many, many, many end users, there's an aspect of scaling the participation on the community. And that is where we typically see our customers having some of that activity sitting within their support organization. So it's very common to see a very, very close collaboration with the support team, where some of the staffing for the community sits within the support team. It's done by the team that also does web care. It's also one of the reasons why sometimes the community team itself, not always, but fairly often actually is part of the care organization. Yeah, that's what we typically see. Okay,
and it makes sense, I think, because it overlaps a lot in content and what you need to do, probably. I have one final question from myself. There's no more from the audience, and that's, what's Bud Spencer Marathon?
So, Jolene, do you know who Bud Spencer is?
No.
Oh gosh, you must be, yeah. It's a great way to gauge.
I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
No, I wouldn't dare to ask. So Bud Spencer is a guy who made movies many years ago. I think it was probably in the 70s or 80s. Made some very, very silly American movies, and I think they're particularly popular in certain countries. I think they're popular in Germany, but kind of slapstick comedy movies from many years ago. And I can guarantee anybody today, you ask any 20-year-old from today who Bud Spencer is, and I guarantee they will not know.
Great. Well, thank you for that answer, and thanks a lot for joining us today, Kenneth. I think it was really interesting to have this discussion about user communities. And anyone in the audience, if you want to continue discussions or want to know more, don't hesitate to give me a call or drop me an email. We can see if we can discuss with Kenneth as well, for example. And then last but not least, our next Tech Talk will be 21st of April at 3 CET by Eva Holmqvist about the changing role of the test manager. Because Eva notices that communication becomes more and more important for test managers, and the role changes as well to a quality translator and coach. So that's quite a different topic altogether, but I hope to see you all there on the 21st. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.